The story of Marilyn Monroe begins not with glamour, but with the profound loneliness of a child named Norma Jeane Mortensen. Born in 1926, she never knew her biological father, and her mother Gladys struggled with severe mental health issues. This unstable start meant that the young girl was frequently moved between foster homes and even an orphanage. These early years planted the seeds of a lifelong fear of abandonment and a deep longing for love. Life in the foster system was far from safe or nurturing for the young Norma Jeane. She often felt like an unwanted burden shifting from one household to another without any sense of belonging. During this period, she experienced various forms of neglect and even physical and emotional trauma that would haunt her adult life. These experiences shaped her vulnerable psyche, making her desperately seek validation from the world as she grew into a young woman. To escape the cycle of foster care, Norma Jeane married James Dougherty at the age of 16. It was not a marriage of passion, but a move for stability and protection from being sent back to an orphanage. While her husband served in the Merchant Marine during the war, she began working in a munitions factory. It was here that a photographer discovered her natural beauty and charm, setting her on a path that would eventually lead to the bright lights of Hollywood. The transition from a factory worker to a pin-up model allowed Norma Jeane to reinvent herself entirely. She dyed her hair platinum blonde and took the stage name Marilyn Monroe. This transformation was more than just a change of appearance, it was a shield against her past. She worked tirelessly to improve her voice and acting skills, hoping to be taken seriously. However, the industry initially saw her only as a physical object to be marketed for profit. Her breakthrough came in the early 50s with films like Niagara and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. These roles established her as the ultimate blonde bombshell of the era. On the surface, she was the most famous woman in the world, adored by millions for her radiant smile and breathy voice. Yet beneath the shimmering costumes and heavy makeup, the trauma of her childhood remained a constant shadow that she could never quite outrun despite her massive success. Marilyn struggled deeply with the dichotomy between her public persona and her private reality. The character she played on screen was often a caricature of femininity designed to please the male gaze. In her personal life, she felt that people only loved the image of Marilyn and did not care for the real Norma Jeane. This disconnect fueled her insecurity and led to a desperate need for perfection in every performance she gave to the public. Her search for stability led her to a high-profile marriage with baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. While they were a golden couple in the eyes of the media, the reality was far more complicated and painful. DiMaggio reportedly struggled with her fame and her provocative image, leading to significant conflict between them. The pressure of being a global icon while trying to maintain a traditional marriage proved to be an impossible task for the fragile star. After the failure of her second marriage, Marilyn sought intellectual validation and married playwright Arthur Miller. She hoped that this union would help her transition into more serious acting roles and provide the emotional grounding she lacked. However, this period was also marked by deep sadness, including several miscarriages that devastated her. Her desire to be a mother was a central part of her life, and the inability to carry a child was a major trauma. The filming of The Misfits, written by Miller, was a turning point in her mental health journey. The role mirrored many of her real-life anxieties, and the production was notoriously difficult for everyone involved. By this time, her dependence on prescription medication to manage her insomnia and anxiety had become severe. She was often late to the set or unable to perform, which further damaged her reputation and her already fragile self-esteem in the industry. Marilyn turned to psychoanalysis to deal with her past traumas, but the process often left her more raw and exposed. She spent a significant amount of time reflecting on her mother's institutionalization and her own fears of going mad. This fear was a heavy burden that she carried throughout her career. Despite her wealth and fame, she often felt like the same lonely girl in the orphanage, waiting for someone to come and save her from the dark shadows. Her professional life was a constant battle for control and respect in a male-dominated studio system. She eventually formed her own production company to have a say in the roles she played and the stories she told. This was a revolutionary move for an actress at the time, showing her hidden strength and intelligence. However, the industry continued to focus on her personal scandals and her physical beauty rather than her creative contributions or talent. The rumors of her involvement with the Kennedy brothers added a layer of political intrigue and danger to her life. These alleged relationships placed her in a spotlight that was both glamorous and terrifyingly volatile. The pressure from the government and the media during this time pushed her further toward the edge. She felt increasingly isolated and used by powerful men who saw her as a trophy or a liability rather than a human being with feelings. Her final months were characterized by a tragic spiral of depression and drug dependency. She was fired from her last film, Something Got to Give, due to her frequent absences and declining health. The industry that had built her up was now beginning to turn its back on her. In her final interviews, she spoke about the emptiness of fame and the heavy price she had paid for it. She seemed to be reaching out for help that never quite arrived in time. In August 1962, the world was shocked by the news of her death at the age of 36. Found alone in her home, the circumstances surrounding her passing have been the subject of endless speculation and conspiracy theories. Officially, it was ruled a probable suicide caused by an overdose of barbiturates. The tragic end of the most famous woman in history felt like a final act of the loneliness that had defined her entire existence from birth. The legacy of Marilyn Monroe is one of immense talent, overshadowed by profound tragedy. She remains an enduring icon of beauty and vulnerability whose life story continues to captivate new generations. People often forget that she was a woman who fought hard against the limitations placed upon her by society and her own past. Her story is a reminder of how the world can simultaneously celebrate and destroy its most brightest and talented stars. Looking back at her career, we see a woman who was much more than a sex symbol. She was a dedicated student of the Actors Studio and a pioneer for women's rights in the film industry. Her performances in movies like Some Like It Hot showcase her impeccable comedic timing and natural charisma. Yet every laugh on screen was a victory over the internal pain she felt. She used her art as a way to connect with a world that often felt cold and distant. The trauma of her childhood and the pressures of her fame created a perfect storm of emotional distress. She lived in a time when mental health was not understood and the resources available were often more harmful than helpful. The way she was treated by the press and the public reflects a lack of empathy for her struggles. She was a victim of a system that valued her image over her humanity, and this is a central theme in her life story. Marilyn often spoke about the masks she had to wear to survive in Hollywood. She felt that she had to perform even when she was not on camera to meet the expectations of others. This constant performance was exhausting and contributed to her eventual breakdown. She longed for a life where she could just be herself without the weight of the Marilyn persona. Sadly, she never found a place where she felt safe enough to let her guard down completely. Her influence on fashion and culture is still visible today in everything from red carpet looks to modern pop art. She defined an era and set a standard for stardom that few have ever matched. However, the cost of that influence was her own peace of mind and ultimately, her life. When we see her images today, we should remember the woman behind the smile and the challenges she faced. Her life was a complex tapestry of triumph and deep personal suffering. If she had lived longer, she might have found the peace she so desperately sought. She was beginning to take more control of her narrative and explore new artistic avenues. There were signs that she wanted to move away from the bombshell image and focus on more mature work. We can only wonder what she might have achieved if she had been given the support and understanding she needed. Her potential was cut short by the very demons she tried to outrun. As we conclude this look into her life, we must recognize her as a symbol of resilience. Despite the many traumas she endured, she managed to become one of the most beloved figures in history. Her story is a reminder of a woman who reached for the stars even while her feet were stuck in the mud of her past. Marilyn Monroe was a complex and beautiful soul who gave the world everything she had until there was nothing left for her to give to herself. Her name will forever be synonymous with Hollywood glamour, but her true story is much more human. It is a story of a girl who wanted to be loved, and a woman who tried to find her place in a world that did not understand her. By remembering her traumas and her triumphs, we honor the real person behind the legend. She remains the brightest light in the history of cinema, a star that continues to shine despite the darkness that once surrounded her life.